Thank you for listening to WUAG, and you are flying Air International, flight number 103.1 FM. I'm your pilot, April Snell, and for this semester, we'll be discussing transformative peace modalities. We're very fortunate to have with us today Lizzie Biddle. She's the project manager here at CNNC, and she will be talking about some of the modalities they use within the Bhutanese population. Thank you, Lizzie, for coming.
Thank you, April, for having me.
Some of the things that the Center for New North Carolinians do, they provide training, diversity training, intercultural competence, communicating across cultures, overseas processing, security concerns with refugee processing, family violence prevention. I'll be using terms from John Paul Lederach and from a publication that he has called Reflective Peace Building, a planning, monitoring, and learning toolkit. Some of the areas that we'll be discussing today are 1, we'll be identifying the problem, 2, the analysis, 3, the approaches to the problem, and 4, action ideas. So, Lizzie, can you tell us a little bit about some of the programs that you're running and use these steps from this model, the 4 basic steps in inventing options?
Sure. Thank you, April. So briefly, the Center for New North Carolinians, we're part of UNCG. Our mission is to promote integration and access for newcomers, for immigrants and refugees in the greater Greensboro, Guilford County, North Carolina area. So we're fortunate. We've been around since 2001. And one of our oldest programs, the AmeriCorps Access Project, was incorporated in 1994. So we have a little bit of history and within the community. Greensboro's been resettling refugees for over 30 years, and migrants who came to the United States through other visas and processes have been coming to North Carolina and our area much longer than 30 years. So we're fortunate that in the area of North Carolina we live, we have a very multicultural population. So the Bhutanese refugees have been coming to the United States for about 7 or 8 years. They were a special identified population by the United Nations and the U.S. State Department for resettlement. They are originally from Bhutan, next to Nepal, and speak an ethnic group that speaks Nepali, and have been living in refugee camps in Nepal for many, many years, over 20 years now. So Greensboro has been a significant percentage of Bhutanese refugees, and one of the programs that I've worked most closely with, our Glen Haven Community Center here in Greensboro. It's been around since 2005. The Bhutanese are a fabulous population to work with, and within their own culture have a number of kind of transformative peace modalities that they've been able to bring with them, and some of the strong leadership. And so the CNNC's ethos culture as an organization is to build partnership with newcomer populations as a partnership, as community building, as providing leadership and training directly to folks as they come in, and provide them the support to really thrive as a community. So the Bhutanese in particular, nationally, about 3 or 4 years ago, there was a significant increase in suicides among the Bhutanese population, more so than had been seen by other refugee groups. And so this has been studied kind of nationally in different veins, and locally we had seen some attempts at suicides, and so kind of came together and went and spoke with the leaders of the Bhutanese community and said, what ways can we really support you all in addressing this issue and hoping to make some transformation along this process.
So with the problem of suicide within the Bhutanese community, you have partners that you work with. And can you tell us about how one would go looking for help if they're thinking that they are suicidal?
That is a great question. We're fortunate here in Greensboro that there is a fairly large network of healthcare providers that are working to understand the complexity and the nuances that our newcomer population have in regards to health and mental health. Mental health access for even non-refugees, for Americans in general, folks that have been, were born and raised here, is challenging. It's not always, it's taboo. It's not something folks want to talk about. And then you add the challenges of language and culture. So, for individuals experiencing suicidal thoughts, it can be hard, both to express it within their culture, within their family, within their language, and then the next step of seeking outside support, feeling comfortable to talk to someone, finding a counselor who's willing to use an interpreter, finding a well-qualified, trained interpreter who isn't the next-door neighbor of this family, that has a little bit of space and distance, allowing for kind of additional supportive privacy there regarding occasionally confidential sharing confidential concerns. Providing mental health interpretation is also challenging. So we're fortunate, the Center for New North Carolinians provides a foundations of professional interpreter training for interpreters to go into the medical field and the health and human service field, but mental health requires something a little bit additional. So the interpreter themselves can also be comfortable with their own mental health state as they're interpreting and speaking in the words of the patient.
So where would you tell someone to go that was experiencing suicidal thoughts?
I would encourage them to talk to, as they're comfortable, their relatives, and if not, someone else in the community. At a doctor's appointment, the primary care providers here in Greensboro are trained to look for signs, ask questions. Do you feel safe in your home? Do you have thoughts of harming yourself or others? And then they would often connect patients to appropriate resources. There's behavioral health parts of the Moses Cone system. There's a number of private counseling practices that we can connect folks to.
Do they have the funding needed or the insurance needed to go see these doctors or healthcare providers?
The individual patients or the clinics, or both?
Both.
So refugees, when they first come into the country, have Medicaid for 8 months. And then they are eligible for Medicaid based on their income level as are U.S. citizens. The hope is that refugee resettlement program is based on self-sufficiency. So the hope is that folks get jobs pretty quickly and that those jobs include health insurance. So some health insurances do cover mental health services.
Can you tell us some of the programs that you have developed through CNNC using transformative peace modalities? So as an immersion theorist and using immersion theory, what are some of the programs that you developed by listening to the Bhutanese women?
In many of the cultures that I worked with through the years, relationship building and community and time spent over a meal, time spent interacting with women in women-only circles or men-only circles is really important to those communities. So that's one thing that we've heard, and there is quite a bit of research, which is we're fortunate as well, that looks at what is the power of that for particularly for refugees who are seeking to integrate and into their new environment. And so one thing we've tried to do is through many of our programs for adults in particular is create opportunities for connection to prevent some of the isolation that can happen, to work through any mental health issues, post-traumatic stress. Many refugees we work with have experienced or observed violence at some point in time or are kind of particularly vulnerable. So creating those spaces through women's groups or art, something as simple as knitting. We've done knitting circles that have been successful with the Bhutanese women, which first start out as an opportunity to learn English with American or native English-speaking volunteers who will come in with some knitting projects, and starts as an opportunity to learn English, really becomes an opportunity for women to get out of their home, share what are some of their concerns together, build that relationship in that community, And at times we had a group for a while that was a crafty conversation group working with predominantly Bhutanese but not exclusively Bhutanese women, where then this craft group turned it into an opportunity for these women to sell their crafts in craft fairs throughout Greensboro and have that be a bit of additional income.
Can you tell us about the programs developed through CNNC to help address this problem? For instance, the Women's Project.
So we've been fortunate through our AmeriCorps program to hire several former, that are Bhutanese refugees that came into the United States as Bhutanese refugee, as well as most recently a gentleman from Nepal that has a lot of speaks the same language and cultural commonalities, and so we really work to support their instincts and initiatives. So one thing this past year that we've really been able to put forward is programming focusing on women within the Bhutanese culture who maybe are at home, older women who maybe are grandparents who take care of younger children, and working with them on some of the things that they're interested in doing, such as cooking and gardening practices. This particular group of women at Glen Haven applied for a small grant through the Community Foundation of Greater Greensboro, a Building Stronger Neighborhoods grant to support some of their work that's just kind of getting started. So the group of this women, they meet pretty regularly, and some events, they've wanted to hold some events. So in the spring we held a Mother's Day event. They wanted to really honor and support the mothers in their family and support mothers from other cultures and communities as well. They work to bring in the high schoolers in their families and really help them be successful in the schools and graduate successfully and then move on to 2-year, 4-year colleges or other opportunities. The AmeriCorps program is a long-standing program that we've had that allows for really providing training and leadership. And so throughout my time here, we've had a number of folks that came through our programs who now are able to serve as AmeriCorps members and give back to the community and take the leadership within and transform their own community and create a sense of ownership within the neighborhoods that we serve in. We try to listen to the concerns of the community and work to resolve those and support them, but not prescribe solutions or answers or say, this is the way you need to do it. It's more you tell us what we can do to support these initiatives. A couple of years ago, there was another gentleman who's worked with us off and on for a number of years, who brought together a one-day retreat for young people addressing mental health broadly within the Bhutanese community, and he invited a number of speakers to attend, and this was held off-site, I believe at a church, and it was fairly successful. Had about 60 to 70 people attend, and ended with a musician in the evening that the young people loved and enjoyed. So the Bhutanese really has the potential to thrive, in a lot of ways does, in our area, and we're fortunate to have a lot of resources and connection within and among that community.
It's so important to feel as though you're listened to and that your ideas have value. That's another way that create peace for the individual. Relative peace. For those of you who are not familiar with the term relative peace, peace is something that is always transforming and evolving and ascending through our lives and community. So can you take us through the steps that one would use in creating a program? So for instance, there was a woman in your community who decided that they wanted to honor the mothers and grandmothers within the community, which is something very simple but very powerful at the same time. Can you take our listeners through the steps of developing a program like that?
Sure. So, April, you hit it right on the spot with the listening. So first, kind of listening to identify really what is going on. What are the current symptoms? What's the isolation that's happening? A lot of refugees, when they first come into the country, depending on their level of English or educational background, end up working really long hours at manually intensive jobs. And so they often work, 8 to 10 hour shifts and then have kind of longer commutes than my 10-hour, my 10-minute drive to work. So olders and young people alike often are home alone for extended periods of time, leading to this kind of isolationism that can happen. And so a lot of what we do is listen to folks in the community experiencing the problems, what are some of the frustrations, what are things that we can alleviate, and then we work, go through oftentimes what can be a lengthy process of analysis and feel like we're consistently analyzing. It's a part of the transformative cycle that we've talked about, is that it's ongoing. We never stop analyzing.
It's the passengers who make this a first-class flight. I want to thank you, Lizzie, for flying Air International flight number 103.1 FM, where you're sure to fly first class every time you fly. Keep listening to WUAG for more news, sports, and music.
Jai de jo jo ka mo